couple of months ago, I did an interview with Marti, who hosts the podcast, Where Will You Go? It was a great interview with lots of insights, and I opened up a lot more about myself as a person in that interview than I normally do. I also reflected on my philosophy as a secular humanist and also my worldview as a rational skeptic. There's a couple of ideas I espoused that I have reconsidered since I appeared on that podcast, though there isn't enough time to get into those particulars here today. If you want to get the most out of our discussion today, go back and watch that episode and meet me right back here, because I'm going to talk about what we went over and also a discussion that I had with a couple of folks in the comments section of that video. Let's go.
Welcome to the Mormon News Roundup, your go-to source for the latest headlines and critical analysis on all things LDS.
Breaking news.
Join D-Vase,
Mormon News Roundup.
that's talent on loan from Kolob, every Sunday and Monday night.
We will uncover the truth behind the news that matters most to the Mormon community.
So yes, you're fully on track for all the truth that can be found and supported in the contexts of anti-theism, secular humanism, etc., etc. And of course, you'll be pleased to know that you have plenty of company in those arenas.
I'm definitely amused that you put the words truth here in quotes. If you've discovered a methodology to reliably discern the truth independent of the scientific method, please publish your results and collect your Nobel Prize.
There is, of course, plenty of knowledge to keep your mind fully occupied for a lifetime without having to consider the supernatural. At least not considering it in terms of your reality.
I have spent a huge portion of my life considering the supernatural. I even run a podcast that spends a great deal of time discussing the topic. I have searched for evidence of the supernatural for decades. I was even at one point in time convinced that it existed and that I had invisible best friends and enemies. However, I have come to the more reasonable conclusion that my belief in the supernatural was unfounded. It's not that I haven't considered the supernatural, far from it. It's that I've never seen any actual evidence to merit the belief in its existence.
The supernatural, and/or any belief, can easily be accommodated in reality as you have as an objective study of what other people believe and how it affects them, how they orient themselves to their beliefs, etc., etc., without having to accept those beliefs as true. I.e. It is true and observable truth, and therefore part of reality. Would you accept that as plausible?
This is an absolutely fallacious line of reasoning. Whether or not someone's beliefs affect them has no impact on the validity of those claims. I can deeply believe in Bigfoot and worship him daily. I can further demonstrate that the belief in the hairy monster brings me peace and joy. I can even bring you stories of people who were raging alcoholics, addicted to drugs, and hardened criminals before they gave it all up in favor of worshiping the forest giant. None of that has anything whatsoever to do with whether Bigfoot exists.
So other than having to outgrow the toxic shell and mental/emotional poisoning of a bat's hit false Mormon religion, to which you wholeheartedly subscribed and immersed your entire being for 24 plus years, you can be completely free of any religious and/or supernatural considerations, other than, as I just mentioned, perhaps as an objective intellectual pursuit of such as experiences of other people.
It's not that I have made conclusions about the possibility of the supernatural. It's that there's currently no evidence that it exists. You keep beating the drum of the reality of the supernatural, but never provide any evidence to confirm it. Instead of engaging with these bizarre thought experiments, why don't you just provide evidence of the supernatural, and that will end the discussion?
I realize the current intensity of your situation is part of an ongoing process of surgically removing the cancerous spiritual cells of your psyche while trying to retain the genuinely meaningful, actually healthy parts of your life. The actual friends, the positive aspects of community, the valid education, the depth and significance of music in your life which, while learned in that toxic environment, nonetheless has a real, empirical present and hopefully some positive meaning for you. I fully empathize with the depth and significance of your pursuit, and understand the necessity of shooting down any and all intrusions of the religious, spiritual, and supernatural as a part of constructing the needed separation and defense against further hurt and damage.
I'm not shooting down religious, spiritual, or supernatural claims to protect myself. You're ascribing irrational motivations to me for my skepticism of supernatural claims in a misguided attempt to justify your positions of accepting them for bad reasons devoid of objective data. Again, I have seen zero evidence to confirm any of these conflicting claims. The only irrationality here comes from your side. And this is really important. You have not even demonstrated that a maximally powerful God is even possible. Of course, demonstrating that such a belief is impossible is not currently feasible, but no one is justified in accepting positions for bad reasons merely because a claim has not been demonstrated to be impossible. That's a flawed epistemology. And all useful knowledge is demonstrable. If you know something that can't be explained and you can't provide reasons for it, it is of no use to me or anyone else. The real fact of the matter is that if there's a maximally powerful being who's desperate for me to worship him and wants a relationship with me, why has it or he not made itself known unto me, as I am a non-resistant non-believer? But all gods continue to win the game of cosmic hide and seek. As such, I simply can't find any of them at the moment, and apparently they haven't tried to find me either.
That is fully understandable. As you are aware both for yourself and for anyone, each and every human perception of reality is subject to the mental processes, history, and filters of each person. We can, at best, only attempt to share our experiences as we understand them. Even at the most rudimentary level in a court of law, for example, the testimony of multiple witnesses to the same event may vary in both perspective and accuracy of recall, even though the same empirical evidence was available to each person. One witness to the event may have experience and training that allows them to process and understand the empirical details of the event in ways that another witness without that training cannot. Thus, in giving their respective testimonies of reality, there may be striking, yet understandable, reasonable, differences in their testimonies.
And that's the entire problem here with relying on witnesses devoid of data. Even the stories we have of the alleged witnesses to Jesus' supposed resurrection cannot agree among themselves as to what happened. Jesus' resurrection is supposed to be the most important event in human history, and yet people can't quite get their story straight about it. There's simply no agreement among the gospel authors about how many women visited the tomb, whether there were guards at the tomb when the women visited there, whether the women entered the tomb, whether the disciples entered the tomb, what the risen Jesus said to the women, and how many angels there were, and let's not forget the dubious authenticity of the long ending of Mark, and I could go on and on.
But to your strict point, none of their testimonies can stand as reality for you or any other person, since you did not personally experience the same empirical evidence yourself.
Eyewitness testimony recorded decades after the supposed events is highly unreliable, and it looks like we're finally in agreement. Witness testimony can be compelling to the actual person who experienced or saw something, but it is not at all evidence to me. It is literally hearsay.
The only actual reality for you or any individual is that which they have personally experienced with their own senses. And even though you may have experienced the same evidence as someone else, their reality cannot be your reality. I do hope I'm finally understanding this correctly. Please let me know.
Solid summary. Well done. It's rare for someone in the YouTube comment section to steelman someone's argument correctly. In matters of mundane importance, confirming another person's ontological reality is irrelevant. If, for example, you told me that your dog is named Spot, I'm not going to need any evidence to accept that claim. However, if you tell me that Spot is a magic anthropomorphic immortal who just happens to be invisible, and that Spot has certain commandments and prohibitions for my personal conduct that if I do not follow, he will torture me eternal in everlasting fire, I will need substantial evidence to accept your claim. Of course, it will not help if you show me a book that was allegedly dictated by Spot. That will only be an additional claim, not evidence. And I'm sure you can see the parallels between Spot and what theists postulate.
I'm not sure why you say religion requires the complete abandonment of reason. The Apostle Paul taught that faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen.
Paul's definition in Hebrews 11 is nonsensical, and I reject it as useful in any way. My definition of faith is the excuse that people give when they don't have a good reason.
In other words, faith it is built on real verifiable things.
It is absolutely impossible to verify anything using faith, because faith is literally the answer that you give when you don't have a good reason for something and you can't verify it. If you had good reasons to accept a claim, you would simply give those reasons. When you don't, you appeal to faith. It's a bankrupt epistemology.
When the LDS missionaries first present the gospel to a new prospect, they begin with evidence, not testimony.
Bro, no, they don't. LDS missionaries usually start by talking about God, for which they provide zero evidence, and then they move to talk about a divine, maximally powerful, and still alive Jesus, for which they provide zero evidence, and they conclude with a personal testimony about Russell Marion Nelson's prophetic role, for which, guess what? They provide zero evidence.
The Book of Mormon is a real book produced somehow.
This is a dreadful argument. The Quran is a real book, the Bhagavad Gita is a real book, and Harry Potter is a real book. The idea that a real book somehow lends weight to your argument is fallacious.
The witnesses who saw the gold plates are verifiable evidence. Now you can argue the quality of that evidence either way, I suppose, but you can't say it's not evidence.
The witnesses to the Book of Mormon are entirely irrelevant. It doesn't matter if Joseph Smith showed the plates to 1 million people who all affirmed of its existence, because the Book of Mormon is subject to scientific scrutiny. We don't need to worry about whether witnesses saw anything at all because we can test the words of the book itself.
There are plenty of well-reasoned people who believe in the Book of Mormon, and I guess you could argue that is a logical fallacy if you want, but I'm referring to people who are well educated in logic, not a survey of the masses.
Faith is not built on anything verifiable. If faith was built on verifiable data, then we would have evidence for the existence of a God, which we do not have. It does not matter how many people who are really smart believe in something. That does not affect the truthfulness of the claim. It doesn't matter if every single smart person in the world believes the same thing. That again has no bearing on whether that thing is true. That which is true conforms to reality and is therefore testable, objective, verifiable, and comes with empirical evidence. None of these things have anything whatsoever to do with faith. Because the Book of Mormon is a physical document, says nothing about its truthfulness. As I said earlier, Harry Potter is a physical book, but that doesn't mean that the Sorcerer's Stone is real. There's simply no position that a person cannot take on faith that makes it inherently irrational and not a reliable pathway to truth. Divine books are claims. They are not evidence. If you use a book to prove itself, that's a tautology and a circular argument. Again, the three witnesses, they made claims. A personal testimony is a claim. It is not evidence of anything. Hundreds of people have claimed to see Elvis walking around after he died, and until there's good evidence to accept those claims, no one should believe them. And the 3 and the 8 witnesses to the Book of Mormon are absolutely no different. If you believe in supernatural spirits, ghouls, ghosts, and demons based on bad evidence, you are irrational and unreasonable.
You seem to be confused about the difference between evidence and proof. I don't have time to explain it to you, but that might be a place to start with your holes in your philosophy. I have a question. If I lived in the days of Christ, and I got kicked as a young man by a mule and my leg was all mangled, and I couldn't walk, but Jesus came along and healed my leg, you as an outside observer might say, I saw a magician do that. That doesn't prove anything. For me, however, I know that it wasn't a magician trick because it was me who healed. Would you deny that is objective evidence, even if only for the particular individual?
I am extremely clear about the difference between claims and evidence. The Book of Mormon is not evidence of itself. Neither is the Bible. I've already discussed that point before, and that would be a circular argument, a tautology, and a logical fallacy. I'm not confused in the slightest about evidence versus claims. You, however, think that because someone claims they saw something like the 3 and the 8 witnesses, that counts as evidence. That's laughable. Saying that the book is real has nothing whatsoever to do with whether a book is authoritative, true, divinely authored, or historical. Claims of supernatural healings and manifestations must be independently corroborated through rigorous scientific inquiry before such claims are accepted. The late Indian guru Sai Baba literally had millions of followers who will all testify to his ability to raise the dead, heal the sick, and make the blind to see. So what? That in no way confirms his supernatural abilities unless they can provide good evidence, which they can't. Thousands of people have even claimed that they've seen the Virgin Mary in the sky at the same time. So what? That in no way confirms her supernatural existence. Claims of divine healing are a dime a dozen. So are claims of alien abduction and Elvis coming back to life, etc. Until such time as evidence is provided tying these events conclusively to a god, the only reasonable and rational position is rejection. Now, referring to your story of being healed 2,000 years ago, how can anyone know the difference between a magic trick, a healing that appears to be real but is actually fake, someone who is just really good at naturalistic but unexplained healings, someone lying about a story that was written down decades later, someone who's just simply deceived or mistaken, wishful thinking, or supposed divine healings? The answer is absolutely no one can tell the difference between those items. If you were healed supernaturally by a divine agent, you might be justified in your belief in him, her, or it. However, without evidence, I would not be justified in such belief, nor would anyone else. Revelation is inherently first person.
By the way, I'm not saying the Book of Mormon proves itself. I'm saying the Book of Mormon is a real book with real words. An educated person can read it and judge the quality for themselves.
Let me get this straight. Real words as opposed to what? Fake words? I can go to Barnes & Noble right now and read thousands of divergent accounts of people who supposedly have seen heaven or hell. This demonstrates precisely nothing.
I said the difference between proof and evidence, not evidence and claims. Quite frankly, I'm even less sure now that you understand the difference than before your reply. I consider a direct answer from God objective proof to me, and not necessarily the effect of a frenzied mind. By the way, the Book of Mormon itself, and the witnesses of the Book of Mormon are considered evidence by any reasonable person, but maybe not proof.
Proofs are only relevant in mathematics, so there can literally never be any proof of the alleged divine authenticity of the Book of Mormon, confirmation of a god, or any other scientific inquiry for that matter. If you want to get technical, there's no proof that this podcast exists. However, we do have overwhelming evidence to confirm that it does. You are sloppy and ignorant in your language, and your warm bosom feelings about your metaphysical Iron Age informed nonsense are irrelevant. When you said above that you were going to explain the difference between claims and evidence, I don't think so. It's you who has a great deal to learn about the difference between claims, evidence, and proofs. A direct answer from a god could certainly be evidence for you, but it is absolutely not evidence for anyone else. Though I'm interested to hear how you could possibly differentiate between a supposed supernatural answer like a still small voice, your own inner thoughts, wishful thinking, or a hallucination. Your epistemology, which is based on feelings and faith, is not a reliable pathway to truth, especially since feelings can be fleeting and mistaken, and one can literally take any position on faith. The Book of Mormon has completely failed to be confirmed in the fields of genetics, biology, archaeology, linguistics, and every other scientific field. It is a giant anachronism in and of itself. The witnesses to the Book of Mormon are claims. Those witnesses claim to have seen something. There's absolutely no evidence to back up their claims. We would then need to investigate their claims by examining the plates, or Joseph Smith's translational accuracy, or the characters on the plate, or some type of investigative methodology here. That's how you confirm claims and turn them into evidence. The fact that you cannot see the difference between their claims and actual evidence to back up their claims betrays your presuppositional bias and an epistemological ignorance. I see how easily you have dismissed the claims of tens of thousands of people, not just 3, seeing the Virgin Mary, and millions of people, not just 3, testifying of Indian gurus' alleged healings and other religious claims, alien abductions, and other crazy ideas. Good for you. Rational skepticism dictates that we should wait for evidence until we accept such claims. That's something that you do on a routine basis. And that includes the 3 witnesses' claims and your supposed claims of a God telling you something. I see no evidence of a divine authorship of the Book of Mormon, and there are mounds of evidence to the contrary. Continue watching videos on this channel to get brought up to speed. It's going to take a lot of effort on your part, but luckily for you, the further light and knowledge the Father promised to send can be found right here on the Mormon News Roundup for free. Proofs.
Proof definitively establishes a claim. Evidence may be proof.
Again, unless we're talking about mathematical proofs, proofs have nothing to do with accepting claims.
But it often only supports a claim without proving it on its own. I don't know what you're yammering on about math has to do with anything.
Then go back and read it again, man. Proofs are valid in math and therefore a moot point to what we are discussing here.
I don't have patience for supposedly educated people who don't understand basic concepts, so that's the last I'm going to talk about proof and evidence.
Then you will remain in ignorance.
Since you don't seem to understand circular reasoning, let me help you out just a little bit. I want you to fill in those gaps in your philosophical understanding. I'll give you the Book of Mormon circular reasoning. The book is a book that is verifiable. It has words on a page.
That means precisely nothing. The Lord of the Rings has words on a page too, and that doesn't tell us if the One Ring exists, and it doesn't tell us if the elves will go to Valinor after they die.
I can read the book for myself and judge the quality of it. It's not a dime store novel. Somebody wrote it. That's not circular reasoning.
Yes, someone or a group of people certainly wrote the Book of Mormon. You keep going back to say that you can read the book and that it somehow proves itself. That is circular. And by the way, dime store novels usually don't include glaring anachronisms, unlike your holy book du jour.
There are witnesses who confirm the story of the gold plates and put their testimony in writing. That evidence is admissible in a court of law. It's not circular reasoning.
Where to start on this one? Look, even if we were to take the witnesses at face value, their testimony, and we have many, many reasons not to, it doesn't tell us at all if Joseph Smith's translation is correct. I will grant you that it is not impossible that Joseph Smith did indeed retrieve a gold Bible from a nearby hill in Palmyra, New York in 1827, and that he showed it to numerous people, but that would not tell us if he translated it correctly, nor would it tell us whether the miraculous events that are found in its pages actually took place. As such, even if I grant you everything that you want, the Book of Mormon witnesses are a moot point.
Emma, Oliver Cowdery, Sidney Rigdon saw and testified that Joseph was dictating words that later turned into the Book of Mormon. Again, not circular reasoning, but direct evidence.
Dude, these are claims, not evidence. Saying that I saw something is not evidence. Providing the plates for an examination, on the other hand, would be a good step to verifying the claims of the Book of Mormon, but of course, we can't do that.
Any fact brought forward by modern scholarship, chiasmus, or Hebraisms, archaeology, are direct evidence.
We're finally going to talk about evidence, but the examples that you brought up are pretty pathetic. Chiasmus in the Book of Mormon, while intriguing, is not definitive proof of its historicity. Chiasmus is a literary structure found in many ancient texts, but it can be employed by modern writers as well. Its presence in the Book of Mormon could be the result of literary imitation or the use of familiar patterns rather than evidence of ancient origins. Of course, while chiasmus may demonstrate literary sophistication, it does not necessarily validate the historical authenticity of the text. The biggest problem here is that chiasmus is found in the Doctrine and Covenants, which we know is modern, The Late War, which we also know is a modern book, and Dr. Seuss novels, all of which we know are not ancient. Now, Hebraisms in the Book of Mormon, though suggestive of possible ancient origins, do not serve as conclusive proof of its historicity. These linguistic features might reflect either direct influence from Hebrew or could be the result of the author's familiarity with biblical language and styles. The presence of Hebraisms could be attributed to the use of biblical rhetoric or literary devices rather than definitive evidence of the book's ancient origins. Hence, while Hebraisms might indicate an attempt to align with ancient textual traditions, they do not unequivocally authenticate the historical reality of the Book of Mormon. The only civilization in the Americas during the time frame of the Book of Mormon that had a writing system is the Maya, and their primitive writing system simply did not have the complexity to reflect Hebraisms. And one final note, there's absolutely no evidence of Egyptian or Hebrew writing systems in the pre-Columbian New World. Dude, you cannot be serious, man. Archaeological evidence for the Book of Mormon's events, locations, or people remain totally inconclusive and very speculative, with no direct artifacts or corroborative findings confirming its narratives. The Book of Mormon has absolutely no archaeological foundation in the New World, period.
Ultimately, if I decide to take that evidence and pray to God and He answers my prayer, it's evidence, not circular.
Feelings are not a reliable pathway to truth. There's no way to discriminate between your own inner voice, a hallucination, and a supposed supernatural answer. You have not even demonstrated the possibility of a supernatural answer, much less that this methodology reliably leads to the truth.
Perhaps none of these individual facts establishes the claim, but when you start to put enough of these evidences together, the claim gets stronger. I find it quite insulting and disrespectful that you claim my faith is based on nothing more than a fuzzy feeling.
Then demonstrate the reality and correctness of your ideas without appealing to it. Stop whining and provide real evidence of a God. And stop making excuses and playing the persecution card while you're at it. And most of all, join us in 2024. Reality is awesome, my friend. You'll like it here. In this conclusion of the Mormon News Roundup, I've revisited an interview from Marti from the podcast Where Will You Go? And that discussion delved into my secular humanist philosophy and rational skepticism. I shared a couple of interactions that I had from the comment section of that video addressing arguments about supernatural beliefs and evidence. Let me sum it all up for you. Evidence versus claims. I've argued that personal testimonies and sacred texts, like the Book of Mormon and the Bible, are not sufficient evidence without empirical support. I've emphasized the importance of scientific validation over subjective, fleeting experiences. In this episode, I've talked about the inherent problems in accepting supernatural claims and the need for rigorous evidence to support such beliefs, and the fact that that evidence has not been forthcoming. I've critiqued the idea that religious texts or personal testimonies can self-validate, arguing that true evidence must be independent of the claims it supports. Now, thanks so much for joining me on another episode of the Mormon News Roundup. If you could go over to our Patreon site and leave a donation there, I'd be very grateful for that. This episode has highlighted the importance of clear definitions of evidence and rigorous standards for evaluating extraordinary claims. Always think celestial, and remember, no unhallowed hand can stop this podcast from progressing.
When it comes to nicknames of the church, such as LDS Church, the Mormon Church, to remove the Lord's name from the Lord's church is a major victory for Satan.
Satan.